The closure of the Sterlite copper plant in Tamil Nadu's Thoothukudi in May 2018 is likely to have cost the Indian economy over rupees 14,000 crores. And this according to a study which was done by a Rajasthan-based NGO, Consumer Unity and Trust Society, also abbreviated as CUTS International. The plant was shut down after protests alleging environmental violations lasting for about 100 days. They turned violent and a police firing on the 22nd of May 2018 left 13 people dead and over 100 people were injured. Just a recap of what happened 4 years ago. Financed by the government think tank NITI Aayog, the study looks to assess the direct and indirect economic impact of the select judicial decisions of the Supreme Court and the National Green Tribunal, the NGT. And according to the study, one of the major impacts of the plant shutdown was on the employment of the local population, with various media reports highlighting the net loss of employment, both direct and indirect, at almost 30,000 jobs. And there were also severe losses in downstream businesses associated with jobs and taxes paid by the firm to the government. Moreover, India's copper production was impacted by around 46.1%, and India has now become a net copper importer, leading to foreign exchange losses, of course. So the big question, folks, is was the shutdown surely and purely organic and due to the environmental causes and subsequent activism, or were there larger vested interests at play here which led to this huge economic lapse for our country as well? We'll talk about this with Mr. Anmol Kulkarni, who's the director of the research organization CUTS. Also joining me on the show is Mr. Madhav Nalapat, editorial director of the Sunday Guardian. Last but not the least, Mr. RVS Mani, former Under Secretary, Internal Security, joins us on the program as well. Well, by virtue of our discussion, let me rope in Mr. Anmol Kulkarni here and get an idea as to what this report is all about. The figures, Anmol, that you have quoted in this report, they are colossal. Any country, any bank, any government, state or central, would be perplexed, dismayed and dismal after reading these numbers. From what we learn, that the environmental issues perhaps, did not outweigh the concerns and the kind of contribution that Sterlite was giving to the country.
Okay, thank you so much for having me on this discussion, and it is a pleasure to talk about a study. I just wanted to correct you that we are not pitting environment against economy. We are just saying that the judiciary must take into account environment, equity, and economical considerations while making a responsible judicial decision. Judicial decision can impact environment, it can also impact economy. And as you had pointed out in your opening statement, more often than not, the adverse impact of environment degradation and economic degradation is borne by poor and workers who are part of the community or the vicinity who have no contribution to environment degradation, and therefore there is a need for more empathetic and human-centered decision making. That is what the point of the study is. We are nowhere questioning the environment impact or the environment degradation which happened as a result of which this decision was made, but we are just saying that economy also needs to be considered while making these decisions.
Okay. So tell us about your findings, and were you startled by all of this? Because, from going by, for whatever excerpts I've read of the report, there were huge losses borne to the community of that particular state.
Exactly. So, particularly in this matter, we looked into not only Sterlite, which is the company itself, but we also looked into the enterprises and the whole economy of the location. There were several enterprises which were substantially dependent on Sterlite in terms of their only customer was Sterlite. They were providing IT, maintenance, warehousing, transport, and other such services. And there were several downstream businesses which are dependent wholly and solely on Sterlite, and they were sort of procuring raw materials, phosphorus, copper cathode, copper tubes. from Sterlite, and obviously there were workers, permanent as well as contractual workers, which were employed not only by Sterlite but also by these other businesses which were dependent on Sterlite. And then there were several other entrepreneurs and shops, mom and pop stores, which cropped up within the vicinity in and around Sterlite plant, which was also dependent on the Sterlite plant and the workers. So what we found was that there were significant employment losses, significant reduction in incomes of people who were dependent on Sterlite and the related businesses because of shutdown of this plant. So just to give you an example, there were people who were earning 33,000 rupees per month when the plant was operating, and their income was slashed by sort of 90%, and then they had to do day-to-day daily wage jobs, and they were now earning 3,000 rupees per month. And these people have family to sustain. So in our estimates, around 1,500 people were directly impacted, as a result of which around 6,500 people or 6,500 families were impacted by closure of shutdown or closure of the Sterlite plant. Similarly, you talked about the impact on government. Now, Sterlite paid a lot of taxes to the government, around 6,500 crore it paid before it shut down. And similarly, the businesses which were dependent on Sterlite, both upstream and downstream businesses, paid a lot of taxes to the government, and all this evaporated as soon as the plant shut down. So 6,500 crore in taxes were gone, 7,500 crore in the income of different industries was gone, and 150 crore of the income of employees in terms of salaries was gone, and then there was human cost of the order. And we went to the
Mr.
the
Kulkarni,
locations.
that is like a recession-like situation which was created.
Yeah, this was a recession-like situation was created, and we are not necessarily questioning the Supreme Court order. We are just saying that Supreme Court should have taken into account this colossal likelihood of impact in case the plant was shut down, and perhaps it was possible to prevent this.
Let me also rope in Professor Nalapat into it. Professor Nalapat, can you hear me, sir? Professor Nalapat, if you're there with us.
Yes, I can hear you. I can hear you quite well.
Right. Professor Nalapat, is this a situation which can be best described as a phenomena stuck between a rock and a hard place? How is a country, a state, a government, the people who lost jobs and incomes supposed to reconcile with this particular situation? You know, Mr. Kulkarni made a very important point that, you know, environmental degradation is not at the behest of the poor people who suffer from it, but the people who cause it usually get away with it. But at the same time, when Sterlite folded up, you know, the losses that amounted to communities in and around this particular business were aplenty. And let's not also forget that the copper industry, which India is in need of desperately, also suffered a big blow. How do you see the situation, sir?
Well, the reality is that, you know, unfortunately, there are some NGOs that essentially work with an outside agenda. Usually it's a foreign country, a foreign company that has that agenda, and they use these NGOs to try and create all kinds of hurdles in the operation or in the setting up of a company. Now, in the case of Sterlite, the shutting it down meant that India immediately was dependent on foreign countries for import of copper, and those foreign countries benefited. So the problem with many of these NGOs, their funding is not really transparent, in the sense the actual funders are far behind the scenes and you can't know where they are. And unfortunately, it's very easy to create an atmosphere against a factory. And in fact, even the local people who are working in the factory may not quite understand what is happening and join in that. And as a consequence, the factory shuts down and all of them suffer. The reality is, I'd like to say, that shutting down a factory, shutting down an industry ought to be a last resort. And environmental impact is, what about the environmental impact of a livelihood impact? of the fact that you're throwing people out of work and throwing people into starvation. That also needs to be taken into account. And I think that is very important to understand in a situation where so many companies are shut down. In fact, in India, if I remember, there was one particular judgment in which a large number of telecom companies were shut down. Now, you can't blame the courts, they have to follow the law. But the reality is, in other countries, what happens is that the companies pay restitution, and in this case, Sterlite, for example, could have introduced all kinds of filters and prevented pollution, but shutting down should be a last resort. Unfortunately, in India, shutting down is all too often and all too easy the initial resort.
All right. Makes sense, sir. Mr. Money, now there's always this angle of sabotage, which also needs to be kept in mind. Something like this, something which contributes so heavily towards building of our economy, making people and their livelihood, grow. How can this, fold up using the system of the country?
You are very much, we have had many conversation on this, especially on the Sterlite plant also. Let us take it from where Professor Nalapat had said, that the NGOs which have a shady funding pattern have been doing this. You can check the FCRA website, even around 6,000 crores might have come from 2010 to 2018, 2001 to 2018. Lot of these NGOs, they had an agenda of filing these type of vexatious allegations on climatic change. See, even a Narmada dam was delayed, which should have ensured energy independence, was delayed by this entire NGO. We had the case of Kodamkulam, the neighborhood Tirunelveli area. So these are all happening. This is a very well known fact. But here it was further aggravated to make it a law and order problem also. And ultimately, who suffered was the people, local people, as Professor Kulkarni has already said, that 33,000 jobs directly were there. The entire income of the buoyancy of economics of the entire region went for a spin. Now they are in a situation of that. In addition to that, there is a security issue also. See, more than 40% deficiency in the copper production, leading to our imports from China of copper increasing could also trigger a lot of challenges to the security or any other country. We do not know how the relations are panning out in the country. We could have been a self-sufficient. Copper is very vital to many of the industrial input, and that getting into it. In this context, I would like to quote Mr. Amitabh Kant that written an excellent article about the Supreme Court judgment, the judiciary judgment, about how they should take a holistic view of it. Indeed, I agree with that, but here Supreme Court or any other court basically comes to a conclusion, comes to the judgment based on the facts placed before that. Here it was incumbent upon the state government to place these facts before that it is not the Sterlite industry. They can jolly well wind up and go and set up a plant, or they may say, okay. But the question is, state government has lost so many jobs, for 50,000 jobs or 40,000 jobs, the cascading effect of those jobs, whether it's a tea shop owner or a cigarette shop owner or whatever it is. The cascading effect is much more than the 33,000 jobs which have been lost. The question again is straightforward. Did the state government place these facts that it is not just a climate? And the climatic issue, the ecological issue also do not get mitigated by the fact that our dependency will trigger a traffic jam in our ports of the country, which is again a coastal area zone and all that. So this environmental impact is only shifted from what the pollution taking place in the copper plant to maybe a import area where we will be paying the pollution charges through the coastal congestions or other ways of doing it. So as very easily you have also pointed out, restitution should have been explored. Even now it is not late. The High Court or the Supreme Court, highest judiciary can reconsider their decision, recall their judgment and give a direction with the provisions, with the conditions, with the charges that the Sterlite plant shall go in for restitution. The polluting areas will be covered up. Countermeasures will be adequately taken. And also, see, for our 4 years, we have lost a lot of skilled manpower. Many of might have migrated. That is one thing, again, they will have to be confronted. And the restitution also involves a capital cost in that. Mr. Amol Kulkarni will be able to quantify it much better. That should also be brought into it, factored into it, maybe some sort of a support. And this is the way the question has to be addressed. We have to resolve the problem. We have to resolve the copper deficiency in the country and also the challenges this is creating to the security and other dependency. And again, the restitution in the plant will be a much better option. Overlook these type of NGOs, overlook the, I don't know, even the police firing, which law and order issue to which place, which was a missive or not, is still not been resolved. All these things have to be settled and we have to start getting the plant operating. That is the no other way about it. Or Sterlite plant should be shifted, if they can transplant the plant to some other place. If Tamil Nadu is not, whichever state is welcoming it, they can simply shift it to that. That's what I wanted to say, Vineet.
Absolutely. And Amol, in fact, Vedanta did say that, they want to revive this plant. It is something which adds a lot of value to the chain, but it's not happening. They're facing hurdle after hurdle.
Oh, absolutely, and I think I agree with the other esteemed panelists in terms of shutting down should not be the first option. But I think I'd just like to take a step back and also point out that when the environment clearance was given and when the clearance to expand the copper plant was given, which resulted into a lot of protests, the state government and the MOEF provided its consent. And Sterlite had sort of promised to put in air quality monitors, and the State Pollution Control Department was supposed to monitor the air quality and provide real-time data, and it should have ideally worked with the community and provided transparent figures in terms of what is the level of pollution and how can we sort of the government, industry and community work together to keep the pollution under check. So there is some blame which the government must also take in terms of not implementing the desired checks and balances in real time when the pollution was happening, as a result of which the end result happened that the plant was shut down. There was a lot of things which could have been prevented. The community should have been taken into confidence sooner rather than later, and these protests and firing shouldn't have happened, irrespective of whoever is funding. The environment is not a non-serious issue. We should not pit environment against economy. Both are very important for sustainable development, and there are solutions through which both can work together: restitution and compensation and sort of jobs to locals, and there are several other mechanisms through which environment concerns can be mitigated and community can be taken into confidence. So all of these things are required, needs to be done, and state, industry and community needs to come together for having an honest heart-to-heart chat for more sustainable development and ensuring that best of such plants can be used for national interest.
All right. Concluding thoughts, Professor Nalapat. Can we, find a way to salvage the situation from here? Because this just doesn't affect Tamil Nadu; it affects the entire country.
Well, look, copper is a strategic metal, as Mr. Mani has alluded, and that needed also to be factored in. Unfortunately, none of these things get factored in when several of these analyses get made. That's the first point. And second point is, it's always fairly easy to rouse up a certain amount of passion among local people. And in this particular case, I'm told that even some religious institutions were involved against this particular plant. And that was very unfortunate. for the simple reason that the individuals who suffered are precisely the individuals that these religious institutions were meant to serve. So you have a whole multitude of people joining in, and unfortunately, let's face it, let's say you have an NGO which is funded by China. All the people in that NGO will most likely be European or Australian or New Zealanders. They're not going to be Chinese. Not even a single one of them is going to be Chinese. Many of them may be American. And as a consequence, they will establish linkages. A lot of people, including myself, we like Europe, we like the United States. And as a consequence, they do propaganda essentially on behalf of China, but without they themselves sometimes not understanding on whose behalf they are doing this kind of messaging. So this is a very, very insidious situation. It's come under some control now, but it needs to be again emphasized. We are a country of 1.4 billion people. Of that 1.4 billion people, the population at that time, about 60% were starving when we became independent. You had famines even after that. And today, we have just about got food security for our 1.4 billion people. So the reality is we need income security as well. And it is absolutely possible for technology to ensure a happy coexistence of good environment and economic growth. You cannot sacrifice the livelihoods and income of the people and chase after an environment which, frankly, is not going to improve if livelihoods collapse and people are in great distress.
Okay. All right, Mr. Mani, concluding thoughts, sir. 30 seconds. We are out of time.
Tamil Nadu state government has a very, very poor record in this. They allowed the Tirupur issues also to get manipulated, and the Supreme Court had to put a drop, the Tirupur drying unit. Coimbatore industrial situation is already changed. There are many things the state government of Tamil Nadu should be, instead of getting into this language and other sorts of issues, they should focus more on developmental issues. The Kudangalam was also in Tamil Nadu. There are a lot of potential. They are now sliding down the track. So it will be better to counsel the Tamil Nadu government, whichever party. I am not getting into the politics of it, but they are on issue. They are flagging issues which are not relevant to the people they are not good for the people. Here it's a very good opportunity. Restore the job growth, restore the economic development. Other things will follow by the livelihood issue. If it is resolved, I think they should take it forward. It is for the political leadership. These issues which Mr. Amol had flagged also, had they been arraigned before the Supreme Court by the Tamil Nadu government, maybe the order could have been here. We would not have lost 4 years. There were several issues, but it is something which for the Tamil Nadu government should have already arraigned before the Supreme Court. Even now, they have to move the Supreme Court for recall of the order and then give the permission for reopening of the plant. It is that area which should be most importantly attacked.
Okay. All right. Well, it's an important discussion only for the fact that it concerns the country and hundreds and thousands of people who find themselves poorer as a result of this closure.
For more such videos, subscribe to the NewsX YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.